Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today at our BRAG meeting with CGA. For those of you new to BRAG, the mission of the Berkeley Research Administrators Group is to provide a forum for collegial interaction in the research administration community. We do this by facilitating presentations by subject matter experts, creating an environment to foster peer-to-peer exchanges, and seeking and sharing best practices. Please remain on mute during the presentation. We will have a Q&A session after the presentation. You can drop your questions in the chat, or you can send them directly to Susan Gardner. She'll be monitoring and asking questions at the end. Let's see. And then thank you, Sabina. As Sabina mentioned in chat, we are recording this meeting and we will share the video. We are currently working on getting our meeting videos recordings posted to our BRAG website, and we will announce it when they are up. But if you know anyone who missed today's session that would like a copy of the recording, please have them reach out to any of the steering committee members and we will get that to you. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Susan, who will introduce our wonderful guests today.
Welcome to you all, and I just have to tell you I'm very excited that Katie Hudson, Angela Ryono, Winnie Wang, and Holly Zhu will all be presenting today. And as Hannah mentioned, if you'll drop your questions in the chat, I'll take them from there. If you want to chat them to me directly instead of copying everybody, that's fine too. We will bring them up at the end, and at that point, then there will be plenty of time for Q&A. I was going to do like this really in-depth background on all of our speakers today. A couple of them I've known for many years. Katie Hudson has been my supervisor a couple of times down through the years. And Winnie and I actually met working at ERL way back like in 2002, 2005. And I keep running into her all throughout campus. As many of you know, Angel and Holly both have a great deal of experience. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to them. And I think that, Angel, you're going to be sharing your screen, right?
Yes, I'm going to be sharing the screen. So I'll go ahead and do that right now. Can you all see?
Yes.
Yes, we can see. Thank you, Angel.
Okay. Well, Susan, thank you. That was a lovely introduction. I also noticed we've got several more CGA people out in the audience, so we have a lot of help when it comes to Q&A time today. So feel free to chime in, Mark and Esther and Philip and Julio and Tess and whoever else is out there as well. Okay, let's go. Let's jump into it. Yeah. Winnie, did you want to take this one?
Sure. Sorry, I just had to still get the hang of the Zoom thing here. So obviously, we're here to help you make sure that your closeouts are clean, that they go through smoothly, and we don't have any last-minute panic attacks on either side. So just very briefly, some of the things that we're going to cover in terms of things that can create problems for you. Things like what we call OLT, where an award is over the limit and we can't bill because the fund is in deficit. So even if there's something pending, if it's not actually on the ledger, then we won't be able to bill it. IDC error comes up very often at the end of the award. We reconcile at the end of the award, not every month. So that's something to keep track of throughout the life of the award, to check that periodically. Accruals, we know UCPath has been a major issue for RAs, and this is especially true when the reversals come through. We've also had issues come up with fund carryover. LOC is line of credit. It's a type of billing on our side, so that impacts things like your deadlines in terms of when it's due to us, so that we can process it and make sure that we bill on time. Late closeouts have also come up as an issue. What we don't want is for them to be late and then end up having the sponsor not pay us. And then there's issues after the closeout, which we'll go into in more depth. Things like charges that post, recharges particularly, have been common. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off and we're going to start diving into each of these.
So, hi. First, before we dive into it, we'll talk about the roles, just review it really quickly. I have a lot of text on these slides and I will share it with everyone, so I don't want to read through it too much, but from the standpoint of a contract agreement, the people who are the most legally responsible for carrying out the terms of the agreement is the sponsor, principal investigator, and the institution. So when you break that down, and the controller has another role during the audit. So when you break that down into the closeout roles defined, like specific closeout roles, you see that the RA, SPO, and the controller's office actually are representing the institution, and we're all functioning as internal controls, monitoring and reporting, and supporting the PI, but really also really playing the role of the institution. And so when we're talking about things like closeout certificates, CGA uses that not just as like an item or assignment to be done, but it helps us to have a written form that says, hey, the PI has agreed that these are the final expenses for the life of the award. And so not having that, means that we didn't have some sort of note, someone seeking out the PI to certify that. And so it's a pretty important document. And then you can look over these, but I don't want to get into too much, I guess, but the principal investigator is the only person who is allowed to, basically identify expenses. Like, I want to spend on this, I want to spend on that. All of us are just helping to advise and guide so that the expenditures are done in within the guidelines of the sponsor's terms or with the federal government or the state government. Thank you. I think the next slide is back to Winnie. Winnie?
Sorry, guys, still
Oh.
having some issues on the audio. So basically, a lot of the information that we need for the final financial report is on the controller's website. So I'm just going to go over it very briefly here for you. So we fill out the closeout certificate at the end of the award, and that basically serves as your PI's official statement of the actual expenses, so of what you've spent on the award. So if you have an encumbrance, for example, that's not going to be included in the closeout because it isn't actually on the ledger. So everything that you want that's allowable has to be posted on the ledger. So if you have something that's pending, for example, you have an expense or that you've bought, but the invoice hasn't come through yet, that is not going to get included unless you do an accrual. This is also when we do a reconciliation of all of the IDC over the lifetime of the award, in terms as far as like the different rates if it's changed midway. And we also will make a note of the invoice of that show like the actual revenue that we've received, what's actually been paid, and compare that as far as what's billed. At that point, we will generate a final invoice as part of closing out the award, and report also anything like cost share or STIP or any supporting documentation that the sponsor requires. And again, this information is, most of it is going to be on the controller's website that you can refer back to for further detail.
Katie is going to present the next slide.
Okay, guys, I just had a little technical issue, so hopefully I don't have it again. Okay, so I just wanted to touch on the things that seem to happen right after you submit that closeout certificate. Frequently asked question I get is, does, you know, I got my certificate in and you've submitted the final report the way I want it. So does the ledger matter now? You know, something else just posted, what, you know, do I need to keep watching these ledger month ends? And the answer is yes, you do. So a lot of these things I have listed here might be beyond your control, or they might be predictable by you and you've accrued for them. But in either case, you want each of your month ends to match the closeout that you've just submitted. So that means you, and I included some items here that we see on our end that you might be hearing about from us. So like if a refund comes back or we get an audit finding of something that needs to get removed, those could be long after the close. But in those months right after you submit the close, you're going to be vulnerable to deficit clearing. We'll talk a little bit more about fund inactivation, which is what you and we all want. But there's a lot of barriers in the way. But those things that hit in those first couple months are what you want to work towards removing on that same month. If you end up with a actual coming in that does not match with what you had accrued for, and now the accrual is reversed, that's great. You're not double charging, but you might have a difference there. It might need a closeout exception if something is coming in differently at that point. And you are subject to deficit clearing at that point. So I tend to see the awards that the cases I'm hearing from you are when you want a deficit clearing reversed. So I tend to lean towards those types of issues. But this is just to say that even after you've submitted that closeout, you can still have issues. Okay, next slide. Oh, okay, so this is still me.
Sorry.
Okay, so so this is the ongoing project you've been hearing about for years now. You know, when we first started the contracts and grants module, there was not a priority placed on fund inactivation. And in addition to creating troubles for you in PI portfolio, we don't like it either. So we want to be in the same place as you, which is to say funds that have been finalized are done. We have a lot to do on our end. A lot of you know what you can be doing on your end right at the end of an award, which is running that BFS COA and activation report and taking care of speed types and encumbrances, and any other like pending actions that are within your control. You will also see on that BFS COA and activation report a bunch of items that are ours. And within that same screen in BFS is an information link that will kind of define what each line item means and which office is responsible for it. Okay.
And I think the next slide is also
me. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, great. Oh, and I've got, for this next slide, I've got link to chat. Okay, that link is for the monthly ledger calendar, which you will want to refer to. I always look at this, even though there's some standard guidelines around on the 5th business day of the month, this is going to happen. And if you look at November, it's an unusual month. There's some pieces that get driven by UC path processes. and their calendars. So November is not closing until I think the 15th or something. One, that means it's going to be a very tight month for us in CGA, and please get your closeouts in as soon as possible. But two means, do look at this calendar to know what your timing is going to be. I took a more typical month of January coming up. So for the December ledger, you have until January 10th to work with it and still post things to the December ledger. That means on the 14th, you will have a complete closed December ledger. And you can do actually, you'll have it on the 13th. And so if you get that certificate to us by the 14th for a final report that's due at the end of January. I think we have another slide talking about, the confusion of open months, or rather the timing of late transactions, but there's not really not much time between the 10th and the 14th. So if you just get everything into your ledger by the 10th, and you don't have to worry about IDC and Gale and CBR, because all of those central processes will have run and you'll have a closed ledger to work with. You'll have that closed December ledger to work with. So when things don't follow these lines, we might have canceling funds that you'll hear about from us and from the sponsor, where they say, yeah, we know this award doesn't end until September 30th, but you have some 2018 funds on here that the federal government, need billed by September 23rd. So there will sometimes be special cases like that where you'll hear from us. And then one other thing is, there was a statement by the feds a year ago that all agencies would be moving to 120-day closeout. So far, we have not seen that happening universally, and it doesn't count until your award or your sponsor says that is the case, that it's still, whatever it says on that notice of award, or the current terms and conditions for that sponsor.
Can I
And
just chime in a little bit more? When I've noticed that when we are using the 120 days, the Fed sponsor, I think a lot of folks tell me, like, I have 120 days, but no, the final report is due at the 120th day. So there's a lot of work to be done even in CGA. So to wait till like only a few days until then is making it really hard on us. If there's anything that we find in our final audit, it just doesn't give us any time to make adjustments or talk to you before we can see a clean final financial report.
another thing is that these sponsors are getting better, tighter systems, which means they may have always intended to cut us off at 120 days, but maybe they weren't. And if we could draw down, we would. So you will see there's just less flexibility, it seems, every day. So sometimes it's not even just a matter of getting the report in timely to, do what we were supposed to do, but even to get the money, like, we might just be too late. So the stakes are higher than they used to be. And then in a second here, we're going to have Holly tell us a little bit about, technical stuff that might be happening on our end in those last days, and why we might not have time to draw down the money that we need. Okay.
Well, Holly will be next to present the LOC slides.
Hello there. So yeah, further about the deadline, the due dates, particularly as Katie just mentioned, for LOC drawdowns, actually for federal awards, the majority of federal awards for the billing is through the drawdown, by it's just only a small portion of federal awards are by like a scheduled pay or maybe cross reimbursable billing specific invoices. So the LLC drawdown is the major portion. It's very important to meet the deadline, particularly. So internally we have, as we say in the award document, we have the 120-day or 90-day due dates, but that's the hard deadline, official deadline. But practically, even with the final drawdown, we have to go with the particular drawdown due dates set by each agency. So internally, with CGA, we have internal due dates every month. So basically, it's 2 business days before the actual federal due date. So this federal due date, as I said, as we know, the 120-day or 90-day for different agencies, but the actual due date is different, especially in September. That's the federal fiscal year end. And in that month, the due dates are even earlier. Normally, it would be 1 week or even 2 weeks before the actual official due date that reflected in the award document. And there are the other special situations, even though during other months, the regular months, not the fiscal year end, we have some particular agencies like NASA, NEPA, and DOJ. We cannot make any drawdowns in the last 4 or 5 business days. So bear in mind with that. And also in the situation that if the due date, the award end date is not any month end, if it ends in the middle of the month, we at least I basically now currently I'm responsible for making drawdowns at the CGA. So I will have to have the final invoice from the award analyst in CGA 2 business days before the actual due date that for us to, to make drawdown in the portal. So all these dates to be bear in mind, in mind by us. Can we move on to the next?
Yes.
So one other important aspect is canceling funds. When the federal funds would be canceled after 5 fiscal year, the federal fiscal year. So that means that normally if there is a fiscal canceling funds in that year, we will have to make the final drawdowns in September. Again, that we still have to follow the due dates, as I mentioned in the last slides. Yeah, it's we have to complete all the final drawdowns maybe 1 week or 2 weeks before the actual official due date, which is September the 30th, if that's the case. The other thing I want to say is sometimes you may say, oh, the award, we still have some awards, they have the funds are expelled, being cancelled, but the award due date, the award end date may not be we may not have reached that due date, but still we have to complete all the final drawdowns by the September due dates. So just for example, if we have an award ended in September, just by the end of September the 30th. So normally we would have, just say, for example, for NIH award, we have another 120 days to make the final drawdown. But in the situation that when there is canceling funds, that means we wouldn't be able to take that advantage of the 120-day window. We have to complete everything by the end of September. So that's the due dates for all these federal awards. That's all for our presentation today. So the next will be question and answer time.
So I'm going to go ahead and share questions as they came in through the chat and comments and requests. So one comment from Miriam Cater said this was an inspired topic. Thanks, Bragg, and thanks, Miriam, and thank you, Katie and Angel and Winnie and Holly very much for doing that. The next question, I think Hannah put this one on here. At what point can we stop watching the GL for a closed fund? And with that question, it also says, when is the fund inactivated?
Okay. I can jump in, and if anyone else wants to speak, they can. We would like to inactivate it. We would like to right after closeout. If that involves a case with no accruals and everything's billed and done. The reality is it usually has to follow by a couple of months. And the harder reality is that we have a backlog of still active funds from past years. And what's happened with a lot of those is as we go back to them, there's a lot of activity on them. So it may net out to zero, but there's still all this in and out that we have to do something on our side before we can inactivate it. So that's a bigger project. But in the ideal world, it's within 2-3 months. How long you have to watch it is, I mean, those first two, you absolutely have to watch it through when any accruals become actualized, because you want to make sure that that came in the way you expected, and the reversal and the actual post in the same month, so nothing's double counted. After that, if you have new charges, they would pop up in a deficit clearing report, because you should be at zero at that point. We would have reduced the budget. So you would see it then. You can run that before, along with your entire department's funds and deficit. So that would pop up surprises. Credits, if there is a campus, if there's a credit, like right now we're dealing with the final batch of vacation that was improperly charged by UC Path and then credited back. So if we had something like that posting to a closed fund, we would talk to you about it. So.
As a kind of a follow-up question, sorry, Susan, as a follow-up question to that, which is kind of the next question on our list, is there any sort of notification process to the RA or the supervisor that the fund is fully inactivated, or a way that the RA can look in BFS and confirm that it's inactivated and no charges will post and we can stop watching the fund?
It will show up as or it will show up as ineligible in the COA validation tool. I mean, that would be in place, or if you looked in chart field maintenance, it would show fund status inactive.
Okay.
We wouldn't email you at the point that we were inactivating the individual fund.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
The next question was anonymous, and the person asked, why is it that when I submit a soft close, I get CGA asking for identifying expense on accrual journal, identifying the IDC, etc.? Why is it that when I submit a soft close, I get CGA asking for identifying expense on accrual journal, the accrual, identifying the IDC, etc.?
I'm not sure I totally understand.
I think I understand. I think I know what the person's asking, because I recently did a soft closeout and there was some pending expenses, and so I had to accrue for those pending expenses halfway through the grant year because they needed a soft closeout at the year mark. So I guess the question is related to just kind of talk about the soft closeout process and why the RA would need to accrue expenses for a soft closeout when we usually only do that at the end for the final closeout for billing. But I'm guessing we would have to accrue in order to get that soft closeout report showing correctly. But you guys talk about soft closeouts.
Yeah, the soft closeouts is very similar to a hard closeout. in the sense that you want to accrue for expenses that you want to be billed and paid for within that period, within the period that you are doing the soft closeout for. So if it's not on that ledger on those months that are in the qualifying months, then we won't be able to write a report and you can't really bill it for that time. If you post it in a future month, that's not part of the soft closeout. So anything you want to post within the months that that the report and the billing is for, you want to do an accrual as if it's not actually on the ledger for that time.
Thank you, Angel. And that's just my interpretation of the person's question. So if that
Yeah.
person is here and would like to unmute themselves to clarify if my interpretation is not what you wanted to ask, please do so. And Philip just mentioned in the chat that usually soft closeouts require carry forward requests, which is another reason we need to make sure that we accrue the expenses in one project period so we have an accurate carry forward request.
Thank you, Hannah.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I had no clue what that meant. Okay, so there was also a request if the website could be updated with soft close best practices that they could go back and refer to, that would be very helpful.
Okay, agreed. We have work to do on soft closeout guidelines for sure, 100%. And frankly, closeout. So if there's anything you want to draw a line about closeouts in general that feels like a pain point that is within CGA's control that we could make better, let me know. We're really trying to deal with that issue of the funds not ending, just the continued activity after the closeout, and how do we lock that down without creating new problems in terms of suspense and deficit clearing kind of thing.
And Philip Larkin, by the way, also added a comment that said, usually soft closeouts require carry forward a request. And I think that's just a statement. And Katie, thank you for providing
it's a statement. Basically, the point of a soft closeout is to get a carry forward request from most founders, sponsors, sorry. So for like federal awards, if you have a carry forward that has to be approved, we have to have a number. And that's what the soft closeout's for.
Got it. Understood. Great, thanks. And then
I have a follow-up. Sorry, Susan. I have a follow-up question on that, Philip. When exactly do we need to do the soft closeouts? Because I have been required to do soft closeouts when carry forward is not needed. So how do we know as RAs?
Depends on your sponsor. So generally, if it's a federal award, it's 120 days, just as if it would be for a regular closeout. But some private sponsors require soft closeouts every year too, without a carry forward request. But the great majority of soft closeouts are for carry forwards.
And the soft closeout and hard closeout deadlines, correct me if I'm wrong, CGA, but they should be in the award profile on the milestone tab.
Yes.
So the RA can look up their award and see the milestones, which are when our reports are due.
So I think I want my colleagues to jump in if I'm incorrect, but for a soft or a hard closeout, you have the deadline of the reporting, but then you have the end of the allowed expenses date, which could be different, right? You have the report that can be submitted 120 days after the end date, but all of your expenses should be happening, at the end of the award period. And so, to the question of Costanza, you have a little bit of room to make adjustments, but you're shooting for activity to happen within that period that the project is supposed to be happening for the first phase, for the first budget period or second budget period, whichever. The reporting part is just time for us to make adjustments and write the final report to submit.
Can I chime in a bit about the soft closeout? One other important aspect is if there's any accrual posting, I think the actual posting has to be done as quick as possible to make sure the cash report is correct. It matches what we have drawn down, what we have requested for the payment. Because a lot of time, I observe that for not only for soft closeout, both soft closeout and the actual closeout, three things have to be agreed and consistent. One is the drawdown, the actual payment request, basically it's the billing. And then the cash report, which is performed by one other group with CGA. And also the expenditure, what's the third part? The drawdown, the cash report, and the actual expenditure that reflected in the GL. Those three things have to be agreed in a timely manner. Because if the later expenditure is posted in the ledger in the different months, in the cash report, that the numbers you recorded in the cash report may not be correct, because basically it's on a quarterly basis for federal awards. But if it's not posted in a timely manner, especially for the soft closeout, it might be incorrectly reflected in the report. Yeah, that's something I want to just add. Thank you.
One other comment, just because, we're in CGA, so for us, a lot of this is starting at the moment of when we receive your closeout certification. And I was talking about the things that can happen after that, but really it's for you, your real work should go into finalizing expenses. That should be, that's where, the PI's allocation and figuring out the budget and making sure everything is final, where really, your work should be focused. And then hopefully you don't have to deal with this other stuff after the fact. So it's just kind of like our perspective. We're starting so late in the process, but I don't mean to imply that that's where really, really hopefully your work is coming earlier in the process.
So I just want to make sure you all know that Katie provided the link to the CGA calendar in the chat. So I hope you all will take that and bookmark it in your browsers. And she also provided the definition of LOC, letter of credit. And I don't have any more, I have not received any more questions. Are there folks that want to unmute and ask questions? I think Katie and her team are open to that.
I have a quick question on the cost share report. Oh, sorry. I know CGA revamped it and then reverted back to the original closeout cost share, or the cost share form. Are there still plans to revise and update that cost share form?
I want to say that the revision came out of the accessibility team, so we probably do need to do something format wise with it. And I think whatever chain that you and I had going, Hannah, is the last I have looked at this. So
okay,
this reminds me to take a look back at it. Yeah,
I'll be in touch now.
Okay.
So are there any more questions? Are we all prepared for closeouts now? I know they're hard. I know it's tough.
Clean closeouts. Are we prepared for clean closeouts?
Clean closeouts.
Or cleanish closeouts.
Cleanish. All right.
Well, can I add one more point?
Please.
Yeah, actually, I want to mention just in occasionally the award amount, the award amount fed into FABI is because of a rounding error by SPO, and then the total funding amount, the total budget amount showing in BFS might be different from that in the original award document. So in that situation, for federal awards, there might be some issues if it's running up. Just say the last modification for the award increment. If it's just say 50,000, and then there's some decimals, and then just say SPO round it up by $1 just by a few cents and get it another 50,001. Just say that, take that as a simple example. But the reality may not be in that number though. Just say the final invoice submitted, the final, the closeout, we just spend fully. And then we overspend by only 50 cents, just say that. And that's a rounding error by 50 cents. And then in that situation, we wouldn't be able to make the drawdown, complete the drawdown, because the available amount in the drawdown system in the portal is short. So in that situation, we will have to come back to, to the award analyst and then to the researcher RA in the department to say, hey, we have to adjust this amount. That would take time. So basically, bear in mind when we're doing the closeout, with better check to say if the final total awarded amount reflected in BFS matches what we have in the award, in the original award. So that's very important. So it's just that sometimes it's a timing issue. It may cause issues. So this is something, I guess, it doesn't happen that often, but when it happens, sometimes it's a big problem if we miss the deadline for the final drawdown. Yeah, just want to say this.
Thank you, Holly. You guys had mentioned IDC reconciliation as part of your closeout process. And I just wanted to let the RAs here know that we do have our own IDC reconciliation tool that you can use in advance of submitting your closeout. So that way you're not surprised if there is an IDC adjustment coming. Just to let you know. And if you guys don't know anything about the IDC reconciliation tool, feel free to email me and I will point you in the right direction. All right, do we have any other questions?
Sabina provided a link in the chat for everybody. Follow the process.
Oh, for spot awards. Oh, I see. Yeah. How do we nominate our CGA rep for a spot award? Kitty does not, they don't have a schedule or process from Vice Chancellor of Finance yet for this round, but she'll circulate once she knows. Spot awards for campus are open, which is the link. And yeah, Katie, let us know if you guys have started any sort of like reward and recognition program, so we can like let leadership and management know that your analysts are doing a fantastic and amazing job. That would be great.
That's so nice. Thank you. So yeah, we don't have our, internal deadline for VCF yet. But I guess the form is generic. So if you had one for an analyst, you could send it to me and or Lynn, and we'll get it into the next round, which will hopefully be sometime before June.
Nice. Any more questions? Oh, another chat just came in. Okay. Yeah, so Sabina is basically saying what Katie just said too. Yeah, that the nominations can go to the generic one. So. Anything else? You guys are getting 15 minutes back. Katie and Angel and Winnie and Holly, thank you. We truly appreciate you. And yeah, so one more question.
Nope, that's just me.
That's
so yeah, I was just gonna say thank you everyone. Special thanks to Katie Hudson, Angel Ryono, Winnie Wang, and Holly Zhu. I hope I said your names correctly. If I didn't, I apologize. We will send out an email with a post-meeting survey, but I just dropped the link in chat if you would like to take it right away and get it off your plate. It's a really brief survey to help us know how you like this and what you want to see from future BRAG meetings. Our next meeting will be in the new year, 2022. So please keep an eye out for an email with our agenda. And we are working on posting agendas, future and past, along with our Zoom recordings on our website. And we will notify BRAG when that is up and available.
And thank you all for attending. And we won't see y'all